right. Oh, what did you watch? What did you watch?
God, the bit. What were we supposed to watch, Abe? This isn't a bit.
Michael, it's all right. We're supposed to watch 1999's Magnolia. What did you do, Mike?
I watched Mongolia.
Mongolia? Is that even a movie?
Genghis Khan becomes aware of the interconnectedness of all things.
Oh my God.
1998. Weird, weirdly close.
1 year before. So kind of the more seminal film.
Probably
really.
just a meaningless coincidences, as all coincidences are, though.
Now we're getting to it, sir.
Now we're getting to the nut, the meat of the nut.
The meat
hey,
of
everyone.
The nut.
It's time for the meat of the nut.
Don't
Stay tuned for more The Meat of the Nut.
Stop it.
This is Anders' sons. I'm one of said sons, Michael Swaim.
I'm the other son, Abe Epperson.
And as this sunset, another set of sons covered the works of Wes Anderson and P.T. Anderson, hence Anders' sons. Y'all get it.
You're
and
here.
We do it in chronological order. We have alternated so far, but this time we continue that trend. I guess my point is next time we won't. We're not always alternating. We're sweeping forward in time. So our sweep last time brought us to Rushmore, Wes Anderson's Rushmore. Now we're pivoting. We're rail jumping, Jack and Daxter style, over to the Paul Thomas Anderson rail to cover Magnolia, 1999's Magnolia.
This is all correct. This is all 100% correct.
And we've covered it before. I think this may be the first time we've ever, other than, I'll say this, there was a film we covered on Frame Rate that, they did on Shooting Threes and or Maggie and Adam covered on I'll Show You Mine, something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've so robustly covered a thing before that we're going to try and cover again, right? Because we've done Magnolia.
But yeah, Wes Anderson, we'll have to do some frame rates on it is basically the idea.
As is often levied at Act 1 of screenplays, but I think we can all learn from, including the Andersons, it's like, that's what makes it an arc. The characters start somewhere, and we started in a pro Anderson, more history with PTA, pro PTA camp. But that gives us, if anything, if we follow a traditional arc, we'll end in the Wes Anderson camp.
And us, we're just
structuralists at heart.
Yeah, we're big into that. So I'll probably have a heel turn at some point and become a nemesis of the podcast. Anything for a good story, Michael.
Smith daughter, something. Yeah, some anti-Anderson thing.
Anti-Anderson. Yeah.
Okay.
Neo. Yeah.
Neo.
There it is.
Listen, Neo. On this show, we cover things through 3 spectra. Diegesis, pedagogy, and the Matrix. Diegesis, pedagogy, and how'd he do that? How'd he do that? I have to, sorry, my mispronunciation.
Yeah.
How'd he do that is the proper pronunciation of that word. And that's the structure. See, we are structuralists. Consistency.
Everything in its boxes.
But what we've really decided, what I mean to say, rather, is that we're going to probably speed through Diegesis a little. Maybe not speed through because there's plenty to discuss.
Right.
Magnolia is a film that luckily there's enough to discuss multiple viewings. Like it bears up to that kind of scrutiny and repeat scrutiny. And there's still, when we ended the conversation last time, where it's like, we could have kept going. This is that. We're going to keep going.
Yeah.
But if you want the synopsis, listen to Frame Rate Magnolia. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Well, I really encourage people just to watch this movie.
That's true.
There's so many reasons why it's really hard to kind of say, okay, and this happens and this happens and this happens. We'll do that a little bit, but like it's so interwoven,
It's a meaty 3 hours. It's got a fair amount of nut meat.
The structure itself seems hard to decipher because it has, for the most part, the feeling of one long montage, but there is a structure. It's still 3 acts. It's just 8 stories that develop simultaneously.
And something that Yeah, well, I wanted to ask, or I want to start from an interesting place, and I guess as a brief synopsis, we'll just say that structurally, it's like a number of montages set to music with scene work in between that usually also has score that carries you through the scene in a certain way to sort of link the montages together, giving the effect of a movie that's almost entirely montage and really moves in the same way that Boogie Nights, like he pioneered this
Very
technique
similar.
in Boogie Nights, I feel like much more than Hard Eight. And it's something he's still playing with is, what if the movie always is just rising, moving? Another movie that reminds me of that is Requiem for a Dream. Feels that way. Feels like it's always moving constantly. We're just linking montages together with scenes, essentially.
It's kind
almost
of
like a musical without music.
I wouldn't say it's like a creation of the 2000s, but like 2000s was a very particular time for especially American cinema, especially being influenced by Mexican cinema because of the films I'll mention by like Cuarón and Inarritu. They're like we wanted to fuck with time. We really, really wanted to do non-linear film. This is not a non-linear film, but I think it also did. It was around the same time that for some reason a lot of film. I'll probably try to find a seminal film in which that's the case, or if you have in your mind, please comment. But there's at some point we were like, okay, we really want like Memento came out at that all during this time. We really wanted to like chop up a movie and see different configurations it could be in, which is not an experiment by any stretch of the imagination for the that part of the century, but it definitely became in vogue. And it has definitely propelled the editing structure that I would argue, and the quickness of which that made TV more palatable for like just audiences in mass. Especially quality programming. Because when you like, for example, take a stopwatch to like Game of Thrones, you'll notice that the average of that TV show's scene work is actually around under a minute. And that's because it has only a few lines of dialogue, move over. Yeah, there's 4-minute scenes and wide sweeping battles, but there's also mostly like just cut to a shot of, oh, this is what their circumstances are. Here's a character reflecting on that circumstance, cut to next character. And you get very much so the editorial flow of this kind of modern sentiment, even though I'm saying that from 2022, it's definitely was a thing in as early as 1999.
Well, it's interesting. What I was going to ask is, so what was different for you this time, or if anything was different in the emotional experience of watching the movie this time? Because I find that this movie does hit me at different angles.
It does hit me from different angles. Yeah,
you chanced on the main one I was going to bring up from my experience, which is the realization that I've never had until this time, that it is in real time. Like, it actually goes to significant pains to imply that this all happens over the course of 4 to 6 hours that could be simultaneous. This could be a play if you could watch all the locations at the same time somehow.
Right, yeah.
It's almost Glengarry Glen Ross or Uncut Gems in that way. And I've never noticed that before because it ramps and fucks with time so thoroughly that you assume, like, if I typed this out on a timeline, on a graph, I assume this would be all over the place. It's a bunch of random scenes that are all just happening, like a giant fire hydrant of happening. And no, it's as like succinct and unified in time and place as Aristophanes would define a play. And if like Aristophanes, one of the first playwrights, defined a play as like it has to be, or maybe I'm thinking of an Aristotle thing, but regardless, it used to be the definition of a play that it's rising action that takes place with a unity of time and place. Like, it has to take place in time chronologically, right? Film is what started to, and literature, but it took film a while to start disjointing time and interweaving and intercutting. These are all things that evolved over time. And I'll just point out that one of the Howdy Doodad factoids is that the trivia teams, when they're watching in the bar trivia, are there's trivia happening in the bar as well, and the teams are the clouds and the frogs, which of course is a reference to it raining frogs. But those are also two Aristophanes plays, the clouds and the frogs.
Yeah.
So it knows that it's kind of play-like, and it blows my mind that it's play-like because I've seen it 5 times and it feels so filmic, so cinematic. It even refers to itself as this is a movie out loud, right?
Right. It has that scene.
It fulfills a play. It's so good.
We're very positive on this movie, and it's like I think it's almost a kind of a joke at this point that like film students love this, or it's like it's such a film student movie to love. It's true.
Film students American Beauty. It's like American Beauty,
a little
but
pretentious.
for adults.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I'm gotten to the age. I was telling this to Mike off screen at one point, or off mic. I've gotten to the age where, it's fine if by the end of a conversation, it's like, you're just pretentious, Abe. Yeah, a little bit. That's fine. That's fine. It is a little pretentious, but, it's Oscar season, baby. Let's go. But yeah, I do have something that I did respond to this time. But it's more cerebral, I guess. It's more of like what I think he's going for. I had more thoughts and more like questions that I wanted to kind of didactically propose to you. But that's for, I would say, the segment for pedagogy. For right now, shall we? Shall we move to the first of our strata?
Oh, I thought we were in it. I thought that's what.
Oh, did you announce it and I missed it? That's on me.
I didn't announce it. Well, there's no sound effects, so this is a very stealthy podcast.
That's true.
Unlike some of our podcasts, we just kind of roll with it.
But
yeah, let's pass another checkpoint. Ding, and it's fucking.
We're nothing without structure, my man.
Diagesis.
Yeah, I'll start just because I think it's interesting to mention the bookends. Very powerful first 200 seconds of a movie. It's 3 stories. It's Ricky Jay, if you're familiar with that actor, narrating the circumstances of 3 bizarre crimes. The first is a murder in like 19 something, oldie times. And it's basically the idea is 3 men killed a single man or robbed a man and murdered him. And their names were Green, Berry, and Hill. And those were names essentially were, I believe, it's just where it was the mill that he created, or what was it? I forget what
it's where the robbery took place, Greenberry Hill.
Yeah, it's just it points to a sign, and and then we have another segment where it's Patton Oswalt, and he is a scuba diver, and then there's a fire at a forest, and one of the planes that picks up water to put out forest fires accidentally picks up a scuba diver. I had heard of this as like an urban legend.
Wait. I thought we weren't synopsizing.
Oh,
I thought fully synopsizing.
Okay, we don't have to do any of this. I think setting this stage just like the movie does helps people for the dialogue either way.
But you're not going to do the whole movie, right?
We don't need to do the whole movie.
I don't think so.
And then
I think so, Tim.
The firefighter, the pilot of the plane, shoots himself out of guilt because he had beaten up Patton Oswalt days before due to just some work-related nonsense at the casino. So, like, basically, he was racked with guilt. Everything is swirling into each other. You can start to notice that the consistency between those 2 stories are just how there's coincidental details and trivia in a way. And the last story is a 17-year-old boy who we end up finding committed suicide, but not in the way you think, in that he loaded a gun the night before in order for his parents, because he was tired of life. He wanted his parents essentially to maybe kill each other because they're always fighting. And usually the mother picks up the shotgun and points it at the father. And it's just like, what if it went off, huh? So a 17-year-old boy jumps off the roof, but while he's propelling down, he gets hit by the stray bullet of the shotgun that he loaded the day before. So he was an accomplice to his own murder. It ends the sequence, which also bookends the film, because he kind of just says, all the things that you just saw in the film Magnolia, remember the 3 stories. These are like those. And his kind of last little bit where he reflects on it, Ricky Jay says, these are not something that just happened. It's not just one of those things. It's not a matter of chance. These strange things happen all the time. Essentially, all we're given in the intro is just the idea that strange occurrences occur. And the only statement that the film seems to have at this point is, but it happened. Like, that's strangely enough, which doesn't seem like much of an observation. But my guess is Mike will have some things to say of why it might be. So
the first one, what was the first one again?
Greenberry Hill.
Greenberry Hill is apocryphal, proven or pretty much debunked. The second one is an urban legend that is debunked as far as I'm aware. And the third one's actually a thought experiment they used in law school to teach causation.
Oh,
like the legal definition of causation, which I thought was interesting.
Just because he did the action,
yeah,
of loading the gun.
And it's interesting because I Googled, for the sake of it, because I knew this was a movie where there would be a lot, I Googled, what is the point of Magnolia? I love seeing what Google boils down into one sentence as like these amazing movies.
Oh, what did Google say?
Like, what is the point of No Country? They said critics' consensus is it's a movie about redemption and forgiveness, which is interesting to me because I do think there's a repeated refrain of, and it's basically those are the 2 main threads, but they completely miss out on the other thread, which is all existence itself, and like the idea that whether anything has meaning or not, and boiling it down to the fact that that's fundamentally the only question there is that you need in order to live your life, is like, whether is everything inherently empty because it ends? Like, is the fact that things are transient make them meaningless or superfluous?
Right.
Why not? What is hypocrisy? How far can you go? Why don't I know that there's starving people. Why don't I give away all my possessions and go just live giving things to starving people? Or why don't I just kill myself, since I'll inevitably die someday soon in the grand scheme of things, right? So what is meaning? Is there meaning at all to anything, or is everything inherently meaningless? And this movie sort of starts by saying, no, stuff matters. And yet it's interesting because what I got from it very strongly this time is, but it still grants healthy human boundaries, which is a great take. It's a really good take. Is like, I believe it's almost a shadow of No Country. And a lot of my favorite movies turn out to be existentialism in a nutshell, because philosophies, schools of thought, schools of like, what is the grand answer to the grand question, right? A lot of stories are written around enshrining those ideas, and these are truths that we've come to again and again as living animals or thinking animals. So a lot of fiction I like tends to just be the existentialist ethos writ large, which to me in a nut meat is that everything is inherently meaningless, but that doesn't mean, because of that, there's nothing saying that the meaning that you create is any less or more meaningful. So like, if you invest something with meaning, then it is because it is, because you invested it with meaning.
Yes,
exactly. Like, that I think existence is self-evident as what it is. That's all it can be. And it's interesting that Magnolia, I'll wrap up, but tucks in the idea that, but you know, if your dad molests you and that's over the line for you, that makes sense too. You can cut him out of your life. Like, forgiveness is not taken for granted all the time just because you have the ability to control the definitions of the things around you. That doesn't mean that you have to forgive everyone. Here's some people who forgive each other. Here's some people who don't.
There's a feeling of redemption in this movie because there's so many stories. There's about 8 of them, but dealing with like mostly 9 characters. And there is a feeling of automatic, like a lot of criticisms of this movie is that there's this feeling of automatic like forgiveness, which is kind of what you're mentioning. That is what the movie is about. It's definitely about that. And it's also definitely about what you just said about the nihilistic indifference of like coincidence. But I actually find that this movie is mainly an appeal for feeling like they had to do a lot of the forgiveness stuff because you had to show, well, at certain moment, Frank, Tom Cruise, is going to have some cathartic moment with his father.
Not even forgive his father, but grant that he has feelings for him.
It's not forgive. It's mainly appeal for feeling bad for things you've done. Now, it seems callous when you're talking about in one circumstance with Jimmy Gator and his daughter Claudia. He acts like not even accidentally, we don't know, molested her because he was so drunk that he didn't know what he was doing. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not a piece of shit and doesn't deserve what he's going to get, which is cancer in this case. And I mean, even more so at the end of the movie, a bullet in the head. But he's then saved by a frog descending from heaven.
That's what's interesting.
A lot of people go, that means God, right? And
well,
so
Tom Cruise,
I don't think that's true.
Tom Cruise's forgiveness comes in the form of, or we should say catharsis, comes in the form of actual catharsis. Yeah. Both parties. Whereas he has no relationship to the frog that falls from the sky. Jimmy Gator frog. Jimmy Gator's savior is just either God, the coincidence means something, or sheer coincidence. Coincidences are inherently meaningless, but they happen, and you can build meaning onto them if you want, and that makes that meaning valid. So like if Jimmy Gator turned his life around because of that, then it is what it is. Then he did that because of that, and that's accurate. But like, it's interesting that his salvation is just forgiveness from quote unquote God. Yeah.
It's very clear that P.T. Anderson knows about what like cancer looks like. Because a lot of people who have seen cancer know a lot about like, there's some quiet elements of it. And there's a lot of like, it's such a cruel thing that I really do feel that this movie's coming from a place that it's not pointing to God. I think that that's entirely your prerogative if you wish to see that from this film and, you know, go with God. That's great. I think it's messier than that. I think it's about things like hearing victims. It's also about hearing from villains. That's a strange place to go for a moral play, but it's trying to say that that's the result of a process and it's ultimately messy. Guilt doesn't mean you're going to find peace. It's not always the end of the story, just some stories. And it's tough to do. That's why I think he wanted it more and more. Like P.T. Anderson probably wanted more stories, because he wanted to create kind of cacophony to show the nihilistic effort that he's putting into some of the suggestions of the characters and narrators. Yeah. I think that is probably where he's coming from.
It's not as different from our movie as you might think, and I'm not trying to compliment us. I just mean structurally. Yeah. And it's not as different from Synecdoche as I think you would want to probably, you know, say that it is. Mm-hmm. It's like that. I know something you're obsessed with. I ripped that imagery off from you is the fire hydrant of happening, or the idea that the universe is not mysterious or unknowable. There's just a lot of it.
Yes.
I love that.
This is going on a tangent, but I like the discussion. There was back in the day, like early 2000s, I was on some website and like Neil deGrasse Tyson had become a thing. I forget who the author of the particular quote was, but there was like a forum or like a Reddit post or something like that was like, hey, this quote is essentially what like Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying with like this is, we're all made of stardust, which is just an echolet of, you know, Feynman's I am an atom in the universe of atoms, which is an echo of, you know, Carl Sagan saying, it's all Moby. Point is, this person posted something about how the thought makes them Like the idea of being your atoms coming from stars distant and unknowable, and that's your genetic makeup, and how you're just insignificant in the wide and vastness of the universe is sad. It's a lonely picture of the universe. And I disagree. As you know, I may be just a sappy,
sounds like a fucking loser.
Well, here's the thing, as I was like, I may just be a sappy little piece of shit, but I was like, I think it's the opposite. It makes me feel big. And I got downvoted to hell.
Makes me feel like a big man.
Makes some men feel big. And I got downvoted into oblivion. And I always, that always stuck with me with the internet. That this example is that I was always like, why? I don't understand why. Why can't we have both? First off, don't get angry for other people having different opinions. But also, like, why doesn't it? I didn't understand. Why does it? I understand how it can make you feel small, but in the same gesture, it makes you feel very large and significant as well. You're the way, like, the universe and all that stuff. And there's something that I think that P.T. Anderson is scratching upon, which is that, like, he knows that he's doing it because he's winking directly at it. When you look at what Magnolia is about, it's just documenting moments and and like frogs fell from the sky. Weird. Of note, a trivia question, maybe. Why is it that two of our characters are trivia like
and to have cancer?
It's
to compare and contrast. Yeah.
Because so what's so significant about this moment? Why frogs falling from the sky in this moment? It's kind of an emotional crescendo for like 8 people in San Fernando. Like, what's up with that? I think he's trying to just say, like, well, I'm not saying that they're connected. I'm just saying in their cars and houses at these moments, these people had something instrumental going on. Emotionally, there was a breakthrough or like a plea or a cry for help. That's just life happening. He's trying not to say anything. It's a nihilistic kind of thesis. It's not trying
like it's the same as
anything.
I would always think at the dog park. What if everyone's dog took a shit simultaneously?
Sure.
Everyone's mind would be blown, but you all have to grant. I mean, there's nothing preventing that from happening. Like, that's allowed to happen.
Statistically,
it would just be creepy as hell. Yeah. And I do think that it's that kind of statement. It is very much like No Country with the car accident that he walks away from. And also, I think that this movie has more of a Get Out quality than we give it credit for. For example, you mentioned that there's 8 main characters and that they tend to exist in pairs of 2.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even a shot where there's cable wrapped, to be put away, hanging on pegs on the wall. And they're hanging in the figure 8-2. And there's like all these references to 8-2 because Exodus 8-2 is the one about the frogs. Mm-hmm. In Egypt. So there's a ton of Easter egg work, speaking of diegesis, that like now that I'm watching it more and more and becoming more of a fanboy and digging into it, came to the surface that I think is really fascinating, especially when you consider the PTA said that he put 8-2 in after he learned. So he learned the frog thing, which is the one true thing, by the way, is that sometimes that has happened historically. In fact, it happened to Philip Baker Hall when he was on vacation in Italy at one point, is frogs rained on him. And that happens from time to time. There's also been, so when I was a kid, we had these National Geographic, like, Can You Believe It books. And there was one that was Strange Occurrences and Coincidences that I used to read obsessively. And I remember the 3 weird rains that it had. I can't remember the third one, but the second one was meat. It rained meat one time. Right. And they found out it was because there was a super flock of vultures flying overhead, all vomiting.
That's so fucking, that's so fucking awesome and metal.
But the one that's happened a few times is that a tornado goes over water,
like a water spout,
disperses over land and drops a ton of fish.
What comes up
frogs.
must go down.
Yeah. So he chose that because he had read it as a trivia question and knew it was true, and he wanted to make a movie about coincidence that means something. And by coincidence, it turned out to also be a biblical reference, which he didn't know. Could that mean something? I'm just saying.
No, probably not. But
but he then bolstered
people in this movie.
He then bolstered that idea by putting 8-2 all throughout it, quite intentionally.
Yeah, which is,
I think it's great.
I think that's great. I also think that that's more to like. I think that that's kind of PTA doing a joke.
He's
like,
embracing coincidence, meaningless
you
coincidence.
Have to, like, no, well, yeah, but he's also saying like you're focusing on the wrong thing, right? Well, you're not. I guess he's not saying that
You're
you
not really
should do or
on it.
should do anything else. Yeah, you can focus, but I guess it's just like that is such a. The whole idea is that it's trivial. It's a trivia question. Mm-hmm. Exodus 8:2. That's the one that talks about the frogs. You know, like that. Magnolia is about that. It's about the trivial aspects about it. Who did the crime? Who is the worm? Like, it's all this like.
Who is the worm? Yeah.
Yeah. It's all these.
By the way, that was going to be Orlando
Jones. Yeah. He's actually in the movie, but you see only his back because they cut his scenes. Yeah. Like it's, these are of note. These matter, but that's why it seems like he has, I think his like opening, the prologue and the epilogue are so kind of cryptic or seemingly inscrutable, is because it's like, what do you want us to focus on then? What's your statement? If you
that's why they're by a magician, right? Because what is this? Nature's magic trick. That's what the coincidence is.
Ricky Jay, famous for being a sleight of hand magician, one of the best.
So great.
So it's like it's perfect. But I think that's a lot of what's going on, though, is that he's trying to say something instrumental is happening and then something trivial is happening, and it's summed up by. That's why, like, to me. That's why what's his face, the Stanley, is like smiling at the end, is because he's happy to be a part of like trivia. You know, something happened in his life where he actually is like, I'm a part of the thing that I study, history.
Yeah. And I also think, I just mentioned because you just sparked it in my head again, but watching it last night, this sparked in my head multiple times, is the Vonnegut quote that Vonnegut is a Vonneguttism, like he uses it all the time, which is,
right.
We don't know enough to know what good news and bad news is. You have an initial emotional reaction to developments in your life. You have no idea what the long-term ramifications will be. And, that speaks to coincidence. And I think that's a lot of what this movie is about, is like interesting just to have different sages stumble upon the same meaning. Artifact and share it with the group. Like, yeah, here's this. And you're like, here's this. And you're like, those are the same message, but yes, good reminder.
It's like the thought of like looking at like an old piece of like, I don't know, like a fork or a spoon or something that's been in your family for so many years. And you just think about all the people who use that spoon and put it in their god awful mouths,
filthy history mouths.
Yeah. And it's just like, that is a thought that transcends time.
Dude, did you ever play the video game Connections?
No.
It was a great point and click adventure game that I highly recommend, that I'll only tangent us for a second, where you'd like solve a puzzle, like you'd learn how to scan radium, by building a little device. And then it would tell you like the history of radium and how the guy who discovered it got sick or whatever. And then it would be like, and he wore ascots. Then you're teleported to like an ascot factory and you do a loom puzzle. Yeah. And then it's like, well, this loom pattern is the same pattern used in biocircuitry for supercomputers.
OG wiki hole.
It's a wiki hole game. It's so good.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, but it's the same. It's like the
chain of happening that never lets up. It came before you. It will. As I get older, the artistic aspect of it really hits home to me. Like, to see, I understand why old people will just go, well, they already did that in 1924 and blah, 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 and it's like, man, there really is every story under the sun comes around again. I see that more and more.
That's what I think he's trying to get at. Maybe he's not saying it successfully with this movie, but it's what you're kind of hitting upon, like the transcendental migration of like people, of emotion or something like that. Like it's about the movement between spaces. Everything's both liminals. It's describing the structure of everything. There's liminal spaces and there's destinations. And the destinations are us, who are works in progress, who have done terrible things, who carry our baggage through the world and influence others with that baggage, but also give hope and love to people and give people reasons for living just as much as we give people reasons to hate us or hate themselves. It's like there's so much going on that it's hard to keep track of it because it feels like you're in the weeds. But I think it's all very structured. I don't know.
It really reminded me of The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, a book by Murakami, who's famous for like dream logic and has a thing where I believe she's trapped in a well or something, or a guy's trapped somewhere, and it cuts to another character who's in an institution, and it's night and the moonlight's seeping in and hitting her skin, and she looks all perfect and pure and youthful, and then he's not in the well anymore. And it says, because when a beautiful young girl dances in the moonlight, anything is possible. So, and like that has now affected the reality of the story. Like, he's not in his predicament anymore.
Right.
And I had that same thought along those lines with the frog thing, because it's like
interruption, Deus Ex Machina. Yeah.
Look at Frank Mackey and his situation and everything we slowly learn about him.
Right.
Do you think there's enough time or force left in this universe to get him to have a cathartic emotional moment with his father before he dies?
To actually,
it's gonna take a miracle.
No, yeah.
It's gonna take a miracle.
You're saying that's the justification.
Like, and then the movie's like, well, yeah, miracles happen sometimes.
Inner Phil,
yeah.
Who's Philip Seymour Hoffman? His character's name is Phil. I'm not just being flippant.
Do you think he cast him because he looks frog-like?
No.
He is the miracle. He's the living frog.
Because you think he's a frog? You think he's represented by frogs?
Phil Hoffman looks a little froggy.
Well, a little bit. They do.
Like a cartoon frog.
Frogs are very nurse-like. I don't know.
Well, they puff out their necks, and he has
he has a puffy
pouch.
neck.
He has
a neck pouch. Yeah.
So do I. I'm not
neck pouch.
Rest in Philip.
But like, no, absolutely. I do think that there is that kind of line about like, well, is it God? Is it something else? And I think that P.T. Anderson is like the little cherubic kid in the corner going like, I don't know. Like, I think that's a lot of what his movies are about. And I think that that's fine. I think a lot of people get frustrated by that because it's like, why did you take me on that journey then? Because if you look at the scenes, there's no denying to me
he's not
that
just
they're not just good
know.
Work. It's just
he's saying,
engaging.
I don't know, you decide. And that's actually empowering.
Decide. That's empowering. Exactly. That's a better way of putting it. But when you look at the scenes themselves, this one, it really brought into view, because I would have probably answered this way even before this last viewing, but man, every time you see it, the singular performances of Julianne Moore and Tom Cruise are just nuts. That pharmacy moment, it kills me. It's one of the most effective scenes I think I've seen in movies, period, for me. Like, you call me lady, suck my dick. She's so angry, and she has just this. Like, what's amazing about it is that it's not only does she have that moment where she's telling off, like, so here's the context. There is a semi-judgmental clerk at a pharmacy who is throwing, essentially just saying things like, oh, you shouldn't mix those together, or man, this is a lot, towards Julianne while he's assembling her like order for all these different pills, which are just a cocktail of cancer pills because her husband is dying. And this guy thinks she's using, which it turns out she actually does by the end of the film to OD. But the assumption to her that she is the one who's like the cause of this problem, she did this, or she's not dealing with it in the right way, is absurd to her. And so she has this like righteousness behind her when she says all this stuff, which is just like, fuck you all. What gives you the right to judge me? And it's just one of the more powerful performances I've ever seen on screen. And then of course, Tom Cruise, ad-libbing shit,
talking about bombing hottie heaven and licking the air like it's a pussy.
On one
end
shit. Is just like, that's a great character thing. Just like TJ Mackey is amazing.
Oh, I'm beauty bombing a hottie heaven.
Yeah, sausage.
You know what I mean, baby?
Yeah, and it's like, but but he then has a moment where he looks at his father and is like bawling. And I don't think I've ever seen a Tom Cruise performance like it. I think it's his best performance.
Never. It is. And the movie's just funny. Like the Tom Cruise contrast between we cut away from him and he's screaming, "We are men." And then we return, we cut back to him and he's going, "And get a calendar." I can't stress that enough. Pick up a calendar. They're 99 cents at any office supply store. Like there's just great, effortless, almost Pixar-esque jokes that don't require any kind of edge or premise. They're just like quick contrast of tones that make you laugh. Much like in Hard 8, John C. Reilly's pocket catching on fire. This is PTA's like sweet zone when it comes to comedy.
I love one of my favorite joke lines.
Funny moments.
Is like when the frogs start falling, Philip Seymour Hoffman has the best line in the movie, in my opinion, which is, "Oh, there are frogs falling from the sky." It's his absolute like he's so surprised is so amazing to me. He does not know how to react.
Well, PTA is up there with the Coen brothers when it comes to scripting, painstakingly scripting, or maybe that he embraces improv as well. I actually am not as familiar with the granular aspects of his process, but it seems to me that he scripts, at least to some degree, consciously scripts casualness in a way that is almost unmatched. I pride myself on that, actually. I think it's one of my strengths is naturalistic dialogue, but I still don't pull off tricks like Claudia says, "I have to tell you something. I have something to tell you." I never write shit like that, and that is how people talk. In such a veritas way. Like that's so appealing to me when writers, and the Coen brothers will also do that, where they script ums and ahs like to the syllable to almost make a sort of patter or a sing-song pattern of like, well, the thing is,
the thing is with Coen brothers, it's more of a spectacle. I would say it's more of a performance. I would say that it's, there's a true, like when you see a character in a Coen Brothers movie and you're like, that person totally exists. Like hook, line, and sinker. I'm all in. That person exists. That is a complete person. And it's also someone I've never seen before. And it's also amazing. But that's like a presentation of a person. That's like verisimilitude versus what you're talking about, which is like veritas, where it's more of like, this just feels true to life. Like it's reflecting life in a way, as opposed to I'm going to create an enormous play that is going to be fun to watch and does reflect life and all that stuff. But
it undermines the first lie that we all buy when we watch a movie or even read a book or most plays, which is that people only speak efficiently about things that matter or are going to matter. And the reality, of course, as we all know, is that there's more long stretches of meandering small talk in between islands of information where you're like, that was actually a very invigorating part of the conversation.
That's right.
And no one writes like that for obvious reasons. But to the point that when an author does write that way, I tend to think it means something. And in this case, it's kind of apparent. Like he's trying to make you feel, that this universe is more real so that you'll be even more shocked when the frogs happen. But B, the flow of dialogue takes on a randomness and complexity that mirrors the point of the film, which is so cool. Like, of course they talk that way. Of course there's a bunch of false starts because the movie is about everyone's false starts in life that have repercussions that ripple throughout the rest of their lives, right? And in between this chain of happening of stuff that is cause and effect and causality, which we're concerned with, it's peppered with random happenstance. Those are the two forces, right? Chaos and order. The order of cause and effect and the chaos of random happenstance also, which is basically interference patterns from other cause and effect chains that you're not privy to, which The Wire handles really, really well.
Right. Yeah, we've been hitting The Wire a lot, pretty hard.
A lot.
Recently.
It's time to rewatch soon.
Yeah. I like that description of it. Or like a big pool with a bunch of waves. and the waves kind of add to each other, subtract from each other, but there's just so much wave patterns, and they all are blasting into each other. Hey, I got a question for you. That title card staring right at you after the 3 stories, but before we see the first seduce and destroy ad. It's a blooming magnolia overlaid over the splaying expanded structure of San Fernando Valley, or I guess LA in large. What does that mean?
What is the title card read? Is it the weather report?
It's just the thing that says Magnolia, and it's behind it. It has it's superimposed footage of a magnolia like time lapse, blooming. It doesn't close; it just opens and then stays there. But behind it is this kind of negative pulsing, negative as in like film negative pulsing image of the an overhead top down look of San Fernando. Which I assume that's also not only just telling us where we're gonna be, but like what's the connection? Do you have a connection in your mind for what magnolias represent, or what the action of blooming says to this story? Because I think that title card isn't if he's gonna tilt his.
I have a very strong theory about the title cards and how they tie into the score. Which I guess is diegesis or pedagogy. I got to be honest. I feel like the title card of the concept segments of the Magnolia this time. There's a couple theories online that are interesting, but I think probably not the heart of the matter. Like one is Magnolia is literally the name for that effect when a formation of wind picks up a bunch of frogs or fish and dumps it. It's called Magnolia.
Interesting. Okay. That sounds like Magnolia, I guess.
Yeah, but it's like, who cares? Okay, that sounds like Magnolia. I think it's something beautiful that once opened can never be taken back, and each one opens in a unique way that is not possible to replicate. Yes. And there's no going back. Once it opens, that's that, right?
Yes, I think that's maybe in the way I described it, but also that's true about the image we see. I think that's kind of close to it, is that all this stuff can form into this other stuff, and that's kind of a miracle. It is kind of in the end, we are all made from stardust, but it's not done with like a scientific mind. I don't think P.T. Anderson really cares about the stars or wants to make that particular observation. But he's kind of finding that himself just by looking at the emotional.
The title track's blasting one is the loneliest number.
Right.
And in the movie, right, like, why do we forgive trespasses against us? Because when you are small and the universe is infinite, you'll go, it's dark and scary. Don't go alone. Like, connection is something all humans inherently crave, and good news, everything in the universe is at some level physically or electrically connected to everything else in the universe. So I think one is the loneliest number is almost ironically applied.
I would say it's even
not fully ironically, because people feel alone, but it's by shouting out one is the loneliest number, he's actually pointing to how this is going to be about interconnectedness.
Yeah, it's interesting. Connectedness is a word that I react to when I think of this movie, because I don't think it's just about connecting the dots. It's about showing that we are all manufactured together. We are the anvils for each other. It's like saying like how we're formed, how erosion breaks up a rock. Like he's just depicting erosion.
It's crazy to me that when you consider that women are born with the eggs that they're going to have throughout their life, and those eggs turn into children, and of those children, some are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have in their life, right? So at some point, even your eggs were inside your mother, meaning all of life, because even as you go back in time, humans merge with other life forms, right? And before they branched off evolutionarily, all life is basically one ongoing chemical reaction that has not resolved yet.
Yeah. And when the chemical reaction is happening to you, when it is in your head, or it is events that you feel like Donnie Smith, I think is his name, the William
I
H.
have
Macy.
so much love to give, and I don't know what to do with it. Yeah.
There's so much loneliness in this movie because I think that the chemical reaction that I think we're kind of alluding to, or the metaphor here, is that it happens singularly. And so we are all alone in that regard. But just like the smile by Claudia at the end of the movie, where she literally breaks the fourth wall, as John C. Reilly walks in to confess to her, I love you, and whatever you need, I'm here for you. That's all I wish to say. She smiles and has a look like she finally found something. Like her the whole time she's been just a victim. And this is the first time that she actually doesn't have to be a victim. And it's a beautiful moment for her. And so it is kind of like, I don't know. The loneliness in this movie is embedded, like it's this oncoming storm that it only really has one story in it, that it's like, I feel like these people are going to be okay,
Yeah, but you could only feel lonely. It's two sides of the coin. You could only feel lonely if you had the capacity to feel loved, in the same way that meaninglessness seems to beget or imply the shadow of meaningfulness. And like, the same way that people on a message board can feel small because of the universe, and that can depress them. The bigger the universe is, the more meaningful it is that you are unique, and in the entire universe, there's no one exactly like you. Well, guess what? The universe is infinite. So what does that say about the uniqueness of your existence? As as the Monty Python song goes, meditate on how incredibly unlikely was your birth. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Well, it's about the hypocritical aspect, I guess, not really, maybe not hypocritical, but seemingly paradoxical aspect of being a part of the whole. Does that mean you're just a cog in the machine, or does that mean you're at unity with everything? Both are apt description of being a part of a whole, right? You are a smaller part, but you also feel like you're the sum of all the parts too. So it's like, that's
Ask an ant.
Yeah, so it's fundamental stuff. It's like team building stuff, but in the end, the nuanced character dynamics and all the small talk, it's just a really good film, I guess. I don't know. I love mundane details that color life. That's also, that's just a thing that I think works on us.
Worked on me.
It definitely worked on me. I think the mundane aspects, there's some mundane aspects that I think that about this movie. I want to talk about cruelty a little bit, because I thought this time with, like I mentioned, the pharmacy clerk, we haven't really mentioned Stanley's father, who Stanley is the quiz boy 2.0, not Donnie, Stanley. Stanley's the young boy who pisses himself on live television, basically. His father pushes him so completely throughout the film. Like, you're just doing this now. You're just doing this now. And it's all because of money. And he abuses his child, essentially, save hitting him. But it's more or less as equally as abusive. It's
everyone's at different points
abuse
in the journey. Right. They're setting up a trespass that will need to be forgiven someday, or not.
Exactly. Because at the end of the movie, or the end of his arc, is that he walks in and asks his father, or tells his father, sorry, you need to be nicer to me, Dad. And he repeats himself, and his dad just tells him to go to sleep. And you get the feeling that this is going to be one of those instances for them. Yeah, like you said, when he in 20 years, he's going to say, remember that fucking night? It's that kind of, those kinds of baggage that like persists with us. But yeah, dealing with cruelty. Claudia, she deals with her all that form of cruelty, and TJ Mackey's toxic masculinity. Like, I'd say that the way in which he interacts with women is cruel, and I'd say that the way in which he is dealt, like he's interviewed, he feels that they're cruel. So everyone feels that someone is cruel. And then there's the character of Thurston, who is the Donnie Smith character. He's this guy in the bar who just doesn't like him because they're both lusting after the same bartender, Brad. And Thurston is just dunking on Donnie the whole time. And Donnie gets drunk. And there's just these mundane stabs that life will throw at you all the time, that it also, I feel like P.T. Anderson has something to say about. Like, I think he's saying that like life is cruelty in a way, like that, like kind of life is suffering, but like people go out of their way to make your loneliness hurt. But sometimes, as you know, like Dixon, who's another character in the story, who's the kid who like kind of raps like the solvency for a crime to John C. Reilly. One of the lines he says, if he's worth being hurt, he's worth bringing pain in. And I think that that is kind of, and another segment from that is also, and he's running from the devil, but the dead is always gaining. So I think that there's like this attention to detail about like, yeah, sometimes we call it the devil or whatnot, but cruelty from others is a debt that's always gaining. But the thing is, if it's worth being hurt for, then guess what? Get ready for pain, because that's what life is. Life is suffering.
We talked about those lines last time we covered Magnolia.
Oh, did we? Did we?
Yeah.
I didn't even remember that. But yeah, I think that there's
everything.
Okay, cool. I think that that's I think those are the two sides of the same coin too, because there's so much loneliness in the movie. That's I think where cruelty kind of comes from in this movie, and this solvency, of course, would be the ending with Claudia and Jim, where it's just like, just find someone who's about whatever you're about. The trivial, mundane ways in which people cut people down are on great display in this movie, especially in the like oneer at the TV show. Everyone is just about what they're about, right? They're just like, this is my career. I'm going to do this. I have big plans. Other people are like, I need you in, I need you in wardrobe right now. Why aren't you there? Everyone's just dictating to other people what they need. And everyone is just indifferent to those needs. And I think that that's why he's setting that. That's why he felt it was a great atmosphere to set up this form of cruelty, where it's just seen as commonplace to just demand things out of people. That's what set is sometimes. And just be like, without any regard to what the other person is about, you just, kind of demand things. And I think that the opposite of that is the solvency, if there is any solvency in this movie, to the question of loneliness, I guess. I don't know.
But I don't think, in the case of Jim and Claudia, I don't think it's about sharing stuff that they're about.
Yeah.
They make their interests shared in any way they can. That's the existentialism of it. It's that you choose to invest meaning in a person, and voila, they have that meaning. It's like the dying man says, get a girlfriend, do good things with her, share the things. All that bullshit is true, That's the profoundest shit ever that anyone under 20 years old will not appreciate. You can't appreciate it until you've lived longer. It's that there are basic truths about life that you hear over and over, including the truth, which I think is funny, that older people say, oh, you won't understand this till you're older. It's true. And then you'll have repeated moments in your life where you have an experience and you think, oh, this is what they meant about that thing they said I'd understand when I was older. It's this feeling. And it sounds dumb, but like, do good things, like find people to love, connect with them, do good things with them. That's all that matters. Or like trite bullshit like people, that's what really matters. It's true. That's why it's trite bullshit. You'll come to appreciate the deep profundity of that someday, if you don't already. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pedagogy.
Sure.
Fine. Who cares? Because I wanted to say something I noticed that I definitely didn't cover before, because this is my first time noticing it, or at least having this thought, which is that the music throughout, first of all, I think of anything, that's what's wearing on me the most, is the idea of the scenes that are buoyed with just a ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
To like say, don't forget, it's still a montage. It's still a montage. And I did get a little resentful of like, come off it. This is a scene.
Right.
Just let the score
Very
die
Punch Drunk Love too. It's just like the point of the theme when
it's one
it
of his
isn't
things.
Yeah, it's just like, I want to keep you anxious all the time.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that that's a pretty cheap, easy way to do that, is just put the music in. And I don't know. We rag on Wes Anderson a lot for style decisions that draw attention to themselves.
Yeah.
I think PTA has some for sure. And one of them is making everything feel like a montage, even when it's not a montage. And he just loves that. But regardless, I think something he did in this movie that's masterful is mix the music. The sound design is unique such that the music is way more, and it's a soundtrack, not a score a lot of the time. This movie, if you didn't know, was inspired directly by the music of Amy Mann, and Amy Mann sings a lot on the soundtrack, and the soundtrack is very loud in the mix. In fact, at the end scene that Abe just mentioned, where the cop is professing her love, you can't even barely tell that.
Yeah, I've never heard it. Yeah, you need subtitles.
You can only see subtitles. Yeah. What you're actually hearing is a song that she's blasting, and the music being so loud, I actually think is a meaningful choice that supports the nature of the story, because music is like a track. So the idea of film including music is usually done 99% of the time because music is an emotion machine. It has the ability to just, as Incubus would say, the 4 right chords can make me cry. No, that's Third Eye Blind. The right 4 chords can make me cry.
I was like, huh?
Songs are little emotion machines that just force you. They can be very powerfully force you to feel a certain feeling. And so we use score to make you feel the way we want you to feel for a scene of a film, right? Everyone knows this.
For sure.
But I think by blasting the music as loud as the dialogue, if you think about it this way, the dialogue is a stream of information and the soundtrack is a stream of emotional color. I think it's interesting that he chose to put them on equal footing, as if to say the facts of life are important, but you know what's just as important? How you feel about them. Your emotions are real, and your perception affects things just as much as the reality of those things.
It's also good because character stuff too, because like not just because Claudia listens to her music loudly, but they also do the same thing when they set up Jim, is that Jim is someone who can deal very effectively in chaotic situations. And Claudia is someone who develops chaos around herself. Not only does she have a cocaine addiction, but probably because of that, she's has to have the TV on and be listening to music really loudly. She doesn't think about other people's dealing with that. She just needs something to drown out the noise, so to speak. And he's exactly the kind of guy who can be like, I can focus on what matters. I think that's why they work a little bit, because they're kind of messy, both of them, but that's fine.
I also love that he has at one point, because of the Tom Cruise conference, he just shows a black screen with the words "form a tragedy."
Yeah, right.
And that's when he's talking about pain. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But
everything's it's so woven. It does actually remind me of Get Out a bit. In that the more you hold the fabric up to your eye and look as closely as you can, the more you actually see additional connections that you're like, oh, and that even references
you're
that.
Like, oh, it's all made of this carpet. Yeah. The same thing. I mean, while we're you mentioned the Wes Anderson thing about like stylistically, in this house, we like transparency. So we say the things we say, but I'll double down and say that just like the music, the Steadicam pushes, and I'm sorry if you can hear construction right now. They are like demolishing an apartment next to me. So unfortunately, that's like a thing that will happen now.
That's the happenstance.
That's the happenstance. So sorry if
the fellas today.
But like something that he does. He also, you mentioned sound. He does it with camera as well, I think. Something that P.T. Anderson does a lot, especially in this film. He almost abuses it, and that's just, if you like it or you don't. He does this thing where his Steadicam pushes on people almost for no reason, a distressingly like kind of urgent approach to a close-up.
Right.
And I think it's ultimately he's doing it because he wants this movie to say like, I am going to quickly get in your face. Also it kind of it's going to be that kind of you're surprised that someone is looking at you kind of moment, but it's also kind of ties into the thematic Amy Mann score. It's not going to stop, it's this idea that the camera is literally coming for you. And I think that is true to a lot of the speed and the camera choices that this movie's doing, because they're either following people who are in charge, or they're coming at someone where there's like a realization or a something's coming for them. Whether it be realization or it be cancer or whatnot. It's always everything's propelling towards you constantly.
And get this, the part where they actually mouth the lyrics to Wise Up?
Yeah.
Each line that the actor sings applies to their situation.
Oh, we talked about this in Frame Rate.
Did we?
I thought we did.
Claudia says it's not what you thought when you first began it, and she's the one whose life we're just getting recontextualized for us right now, like it's twisting before our eyes. Yeah. Jimmy says, you're sure there's a cure and you have finally found it, and that refers to his cancer. He's going to shoot himself in the brain. That's the cure. Donnie says, you think one drink will shrink till you're underground and living down, which, he's wasted and he's about to go rob his place of work. And Linda says, prepare a list for what you need.
And he's a drunk also.
The deed. Yeah, he's a drunk, exactly.
Yeah.
And Linda says, prepare a list for what you need before you sign away the deed. And she's about to reconfigure her
his will. Yeah. That's Wise Up. Here's a question about what the last line in the Wise Up. Because the refrain is it's not going to stop, repeat the verse. So verse, chorus, or whatever. And then the last line is it's not going to stop. And then it's so give up.
So just give up. Yeah.
So give up. Yeah.
Let go with the flow, be present. I don't know. These are the vibes I get.
Or it's also framing, if you notice that little montage, the last two people we like kind of check in with are Linda, Julianne Moore, who attempts to take her own life, and Jimmy Gator, Thomas Baker Hall, who we don't know yet, but the realization with his wife Rose is going to allude to, you molested our child, even if you don't know that you did. And he's going to be like, well, that's over for me then. I'm going to shoot
Goodbye,
myself.
sir.
Goodbye to everyone. So like, I thought that was an interesting notion. I don't think he's saying like, so there's an option on the table is suicide. But I think that he is saying very much so.
It's a fun flourish. Lyric matches content.
I think it's fun. Well, I mean, here's the thing. That song was written for the movie. Like, it's not like he's finding this. He's working with Amy Mann to find the lyrics. To me, that whole thing is like, I guess it's what it's saying is, it could be give up, just, like let yourself be taken by the flow of the stream. But I think it's more like sometimes this messiness causes people to try to commit suicide. So sometimes that's what people feel like they should do. I think he's very, very like secular when it comes to morality in this movie. There's some dark places this goes if you allow the extensions of these characters to continue to persist without being stopped, right? Like the continual abuse of a child, stuff like that.
But everything goes somewhere. Energy is maintained. Like,
right.
And hey, another Vonneguttism. And so it goes, and so it goes. And the book says we may be through with the past, but it ain't through with us.
Right.
So that cause and effect, the ripples are eternal, and they extend far beyond where you can see them or predict them.
Yeah.
And because of the mess, we often require forgiveness. And it's up to each of us to determine what can be forgiven and what can't, because everyone lives with some form of hypocrisy, which I think is very clearly why John C. says, sometimes people need to be forgiven and sometimes people need to go to jail. That's a very tricky thing on my part, making that call. The law is the law. Heck, if I'm going to break it, you can forgive someone, but that's the tough part. What can we forgive? Tough part of the job. Tough part of walking down the street. Pretty, even movies that people find inscrutable, you can still find a line where it basically lays it all out. Because
they lay it out. Yeah.
Screenwriters want to be heard. They want to be understood for the most part.
Yeah. But it did happen is something that we cut to is it just talking about the circumstance stuff that or like the
I think it's talking
serendipity?
about coincidence, but it's also alluding to, I think Claudia made the art as art therapy because of the abuse.
Let's unpack. Why is it that in some cases serendipity, like Deus Ex Machina, like, I don't know, your favorite action TV show that has
Kismet.
the character pointing a gun at another character, and because of plot armor, that person can't die, so someone behind them shoots them. Serendipity is frustrating in writing, yet two of our favorite directors and filmmakers are people who love to discuss the serendipity and coincidence of everything, about the random configurations of atoms that ultimately
Or even that there is
create
sentient
some
life.
moment,
Yeah.
and that's momentous, and that's serendipitous, and no reason, it just came into being, but it happened. What does that mean?
That's the core engine of what's exciting about life, right? It's that who knows what this shit's going to deliver to my sensory organs next. This shit is wild.
I think it's a little more. I guess I think it's that when the writing makes it, this writing makes it so that everything is circumstantial. So nothing is like a hack of writing. Nothing like, and we got it because this thing happened at the end and it made everything sum up. You don't get the feeling that you're propelling.
The serendipity is not out of convenience. It's inconvenient.
It's inconvenient. It's just there. And I think that's why it's tough. I found the first time I watched this movie, I was like hit like, I mean, I was pretty young, but I got like hit by a truck basically, because I just didn't understand how it was a movie. Cause I was like, but like, who's the hero though? You know, like who's winning? Who's winning right now? And it blew my mind. I think I think it's as important as ever to kind of be okay with that kind of filmmaking. But it did make me think of that question, because that type of filmmaking almost excuses people who don't connect all the tissue in a different way. You know, they just kind of write what they want to write. Very Tarantino. You know, he writes what he wants to write. A Royale with cheese.
Or any rom-com.
Or any rom-com.
Or any episode of Seinfeld.
I mean, they all have ways in which they operate. You know, a rom-com has to have a kiss or something like that. But
no, but meet cutes. They'll like be in New York and they'll run into each other.
And it'll just be like bazoonga. You know,
we were meant to bazinga.
What's a bazoonga?
We were meant to be
because it's like a sexier bazinga is bazoonga.
Bazinga.
Yeah. What else?
Yeah.
What else? There's so many other things I feel like I could talk about, but they all feel like smaller than the things that we've been talking about so far.
No, I think we took a big bite out of the as we said, you can digest this film eternally. I don't think we owe it to everyone to go until there's nothing left to be said about Magnolia, because that's impossible. So that's howdy do that time, which means trivia, behind the scenes information. Anything that really stuck out as far as the crafting of the movie. You already mentioned the pushes. I think a really strong editing joke that comes to mind is the brilliance of using "Thus Spake Zarathustra" as Tom Cruise's intro, and it's being used in a cinematic way because it's this long shot of a house in a suburban neighborhood. By which I mean it's being used in a Kubrickian way. Like 2001 is famous for long still shots with pretty light where you get to look at it like a painting for a long time. And they do that with that shot. Like it's a 2001 Kubricky shot, and they're playing 2000 and Thus Spake. And it's almost like the epitome of a moment that you would never cut off. Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to let any music tail out, it's Thus Spake Zarathustra, the final note. And the way they introduce Tom Cruise is he comes on stage and hits stop on the tape deck, so it's like dun dun dun, like you just get a second of the triumph and then it just shuts off. And I just think it's like so much funnier than I can explain in words when you experience that in the flow of the movie.
It's because he's trying to make you TJ Mackey, the character, is trying to make you
like,
think
this is epic, but I don't have time for this.
This is what it's like to come. is basically what he's
exactly.
saying. But and that's funny because it's like this guy thinks so much of himself. Yeah, that's a beautiful, like
great craft moment.
Great little craft moment. Something I found, or I've always found, is pretty amazing about this is that it works down to the scene. The more it rains, the more chaotic the pacing is, the faster the film speeds up. And if it's sunny and nice and clear, which he goes out of the way to tell us in a few of these like title or these little cards, interstitial cards that say like calm weather and stuff like that. He wants us to think about the weather before we're thinking about frogs at the end. But the calmer the weather is, the more calm the pacing is, this movie slows down.
Oh, that's what I thought. And the chyrons also point out the weather. That was what I wanted to say about the score, is I think he's doing a similar thing with the weather to point out that weather is like the music of our lives, because our lives are like focused on whatever they're focused on. And then in the background, there's this quality of life that's just the weather, and we don't control it, and it shifts, and it has a strong effect on our mood. And like sometimes, are you in a bad mood, or is it just too hot today? Like those are kind of, there's overlap.
Yeah.
there.
Are you agitated?
That's why,
yeah, exactly.
that's his interest in the weather, is that we are products of our environment. We can't not be. We're connected to our surroundings.
Is it a full moon and are you a werewolf?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This was the first movie in the Dark Universe.
Yeah, he's the first villain.
Yeah.
God, that's so true.
Claudia was the first character created, and the other characters branched off from her. It was going to be a very short, straightforward movie just about Claudia. That's interesting.
I think that's interesting. Here's my favorite factoid I think that we got from the same. P.T. Anderson wrote the bulk of the script at a William H. Macy's cabin. He did it in 2 weeks, but the reason he sequestered himself in the cabin is he was afraid to go outside because he had seen a snake.
Yeah,
it just makes me laugh at sometimes you think of
like
these
Charlie Kaufman shit.
Yeah, just like, oh no, I gotta write Magnolia. It's just funny to me.
They reference 8-2 over 100 times in the movie. Almost every location contains at least one picture.
That's way too many. I had no clue that was true.
Almost every location contains one picture or painting of a magnolia.
Oh yeah, and Fiona Apple, didn't she do most of the paintings in this movie?
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Right.
That's crazy. Amy Mann and Fiona Apple fucking killing the music.
And let's see. Oh, I like that PTA has been quoted as saying, "For better or worse, Magnolia is the best movie I'll probably ever make."
Yeah.
I think he might not be wrong.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to see Lick Pete's.
I'm trying to think
I haven't seen it.
If I think I do like Magnolia better than There Will Be Blood. So
Luis Guzman is credited as himself. That's hilarious because he's a dick to the kids.
Yeah, that's so funny.
It's like celebrity.
Speaking of the quiz show, I've heard two different accounts, but it seems that the one is true, or that the internet is saying is true, is that he's the son of a former TV announcer, and so he saw on sets through his father. But I believe I've heard the story, so fact check me on it, because I didn't really fact check myself because I've heard the story so many times, that he worked as like an AD or a PA on a kids quiz TV show, and he familiarized himself with the protocols and the asks of the cast. That's a big thing that he emphasizes, is that the casts are always very demanding. And the crew is very demanding, and that's unique to that kind of atmosphere. And it's not a flattering portrait, but it's where he kind of got the design of the sense of this is a weird space. You interact with humans in a strange way here, in a very lonely way. And that kind of said, that's kind of like life in a way. And that made him say, well, let's make a story just about normal people, but with the same kind of set protocols and desensitized kind of interactions with each other. What does that do? So I think that's kind of cool to be like, cool. I worked on a show one time. I want to know what that show is, just because I would be like, whoever ran that show, those producers, you created Magnolia. That's just funny.
This is amazing to me. They use that line over and over. Jimmy Gator says it. The book says we might be through with the past, but the past ain't through with us.
Mm-hmm.
The reference is specifically to the opening sentence of a specific book, The Natural History of Nonsense, which was a book debunking superstitious beliefs as mere coincidence. And the professor who wrote that book served as the host of several television quiz shows in the UK. Isn't that amazing? That's almost like the Felina thing for the ending of Breaking Bad, where I'm like, how is this all? So like,
how did that
serendipity is woven into the DNA of this thing.
Like down from the the Exodus 8:2 thing as well.
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's like one of those perfect things, because you tell me that fact and I'm like, that is amazing. Who the fuck cares? I don't care about trivia ever. Trivia is bullshit to me. Now, I know a lot of people don't feel that way, but like it is. It is.
Respect the segment. We're in the segment.
And I'm just like, that is so true to the movie. The movie is kind of saying that it's not that trivia, I guess, is bullshit. It's not that it's important.
Here's trivia. It's not bullshit. My last one. PTA said in an interview that Phil Parma is the closest to Philip Seymour Hoffman of any character he's ever played. And that's really sweet to know, because Phil Parma is a good ass dude. And I like to think that Hoffman was a good ass dude.
Yeah.
So that pleases
that pleases me.
Yeah.
I know you want to just railroad me right out of this anti-trivia rant that I'm going on, but you're not going to get away with it.
I love trivia. I love trivia, dude.
It's just funny to me when you like...
I was in one of these quiz teams. Like, I did this in high school.
That's so cool. And it's like, I don't know, like I read some of this stuff. And I'm not saying you do it. You usually pick good trivia. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. Baby, don't change. I'm just saying there's a factoid that I read. I think it was like an IMDb, which I've decided I'm never going to use because fuck these
Their
factoids.
Trivia sucks, yeah.
There's one of them, which is because it's just written by, I don't know, some random person. Anyone. Yeah. That I laughed at, which was that it was like, it takes a lot from Paul Thomas Anderson is heavily influenced by filmmaker Robert Altman, which is very true. That's Magnolia. Like, it's a good movie to bring up when you're mentioning Magnolia is the other director, especially like Nashville and some of his sweeping genres, sweeping drama films. And the trivia was like, which is interesting because both of those directors' last names start with an A and end with an N.
Shut up.
Yes, dude.
Fuck up.
It reminds me of like the NBA.
You know what else starts with an A and ends with an N? Ass clown.
And Anders' Sons.
And Anders' son. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It ends with, I guess, an S though.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
It reminds me of the NBA because at some point in like the 2000s, they like made a database of all the factoids of all the things so a computer could deal with it. And I'm pretty sure that they just have like a filter, like the commentator just has a computer in front of them that has like this database, and it's just like, give me some good facts about like what is happening in this in this game right now, and it's like always comes out as some bullshit like, this is the highest he's ever scored or the fastest he's ever scored 18 points on a Sunday in March. You know, it's like, who gives a fuck? And it's, I don't know, it's this interesting obsession with trivia that I think Paul Thomas Anderson also thinks is funny. Yeah.
Well, that's an episode because Abe's railing against the very thing that we're doing and talking about how boring it is. So I think it's time to wrap up then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
When Abe is providing very cogent arguments as to why you shouldn't be listening to this right now, I think it's time to wrap up. But man, how about the diegesis and pedagogy segments? You can't shit on those. Those are strong.
Yeah. I'll make my own podcast.
You know what? Director Piece Theater is almost entirely Howdy Do Dat. So where do you even get off, sir?
That's true.
Trivia is an expansive term.
You're right. I'm a hypocrite. I'm going to go cry now. Thanks.
Trivia can also imply like, I don't know. I guess it implies it's trivial because that's the whole point. But to me, trivia also means the artistic intent behind the methodologies used. That's not that trivial.
That's not that trivial.
But it is trivia.
That's true. I guess, yeah, that's true. I mean, history in mass is not trivial, but it's where most of trivia comes from. You can posit any statement the way that you want it anyway. So
this sucks.
Who can
this
say?
Is bad. Go to patreon.com/smallbeans to support us and hear a bunch of exclusive podcast content.
Now you're getting it.
Yeah. You can check out, where's our merch store, Abe?
TeePublic. Go to TeePublic. It's not a
just
good
search for Small Beans. Yeah.
Small Beans stores are the name of our thing, because we couldn't get Small Beans because someone else has it, but I don't think there's
look out.
But it's at
for
the bottom.
relaunch.
It's in the description of this it's in the description of this
there you go.
podcast, so you're
it's
good.
On the show notes at patreon.com/smallbeans.
Or any of them. It's on all.
Look out
of
for
them.
the relaunch of One-Upsmanship in June.
Oh shit. This is coming out tomorrow too. Or
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think
Just
we're
like,
allowed to say now.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So I'm trying to say it a lot so that we get people, people don't miss the boat. But basically it's a time slot shift when you used to have to follow Futurama from night to night. One-Upsmanship is leaving the Patreon platform and going over to the iHeartRadio. It's going to spin off. It's going to spin off from Small Beans. So it'll still be exactly the same show. It'll just happen weekly and it'll be on iHeartRadio. So if you find yourself missing One-Upsmanship come June, make sure you go to your podcasting app and type in One-Upsmanship instead of just Small Beans.
Yeah.
And Small Beans will still release shit at the exact same rate. We're not lessening content.
Right. It's just that
You're
show
welcome.
that's done well.
Just that show.
And iHeart was like, hey, that's a show we would like to have on our network. And we're like, yeah, for the money.
More people will hear it that way and we get some money.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yep.
The other thing that we like to announce, or I like to announce, is that come join us if you use Discord. If you don't know what Discord is, maybe look into it if you're interested in this kind of thing. On Monday nights, we have a movie night. Michael and I basically force each other to watch a movie every Monday, or maybe two. And we go, hey, people, join us, watch and witness that event. And so they go into the Discord for Small Beans, which you can, if you don't have access to, you can just DM us on Patreon and we'll give you a link. And you can come listen to us watch movies yourselves and talk and chat. It's a fun night, 6 p.m. Mondays.
Give us a review on the Apple iTunes store. Let's see. Trivia. Small Beans trivia. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.